Paramount Importance. Huh. Is this thing on? You are live.
Hello and welcome to the world's first live underwater podcast. My name is Kurt Krispyn from Paramount Importance, and today we are coming to you live from Rottnest Island. And for World Seagrass Day, I've got very special guest here, Associate Professor Keulen from Murdoch University. Mike, how are you feeling? I'm absolutely stoked. This is the best thing for advertising seagrass to the wider population. I'm super excited. Our trip out here wasn't exactly smooth sailing, was it? We ended up floating out in the middle of the ocean with the engines cocking out. That's right, we're here now. Exactly, we are here now, and for World Seagrass Day, let's dive straight into it. Mike, what is seagrass and how is it different from algae? Okay, so seagrasses are flowering plants. They produce flowers like terrestrial plants, and they're different from algae in that the algae are much simpler. They don't have the complex organs and structures that we find in seagrasses. Right, well, should we go have a look at some and then describe a bit more about that? Sure, let's go. Okay, so here at Rottnest Island we've got a whole bunch of different seagrass species. I've counted about 7 here already, and most of what we can see here is actually 2 different species of Posidonia. So what species, because I can see some other species here as well, which one is what? Okay, so the one that forms these big meadows is called Posidonia australis, and it's really common along the southern Australian coastline. Huge amounts of it, and it forms these massive meadows that you can see, spreading for miles. Why is seagrass an important ecosystem? Well, you can actually see that really well here. So seagrasses, obviously, compared to bare sand, produce a 3-dimensional structure above the seabed. So it's a place for things to hide, juvenile fish to have their early life history, and so on. But they also help to stabilise the sediment, and you can see that here. We've got the seagrass meadow up here. Oops, sorry about the sand. And you can see where there's just bare sand, it's dropped right away. So the seagrass is actually holding the sand in place. And that would help with coastal erosion, right? For sure. So if you had the sand washing away, if the seagrass wasn't here to hold the sand in place, it'd wash away and you would lose the sand off the beaches as well. When people use anchors on their boats, does that cause an impact on the seagrass? It can do, and here at Rottnest Island we've certainly had some history of that, where we've had lots of moorings that weren't well designed, and they resulted in holes being punched into the seagrass meadows, and so that caused some erosion of the seagrass meadows. Right. So is this little bit of seagrass here, is that seagrass or is that something else? Yes, that's seagrass as well. So this is a tropical species. This is called Syringonium isoetofolium. It's come down the Lewin Current, down the West Australian coast, and it actually makes it all the way down to Geograph Bay, so near Busselton. Right, and we can see a lot of algae growth that's on the seagrass. Is that good for the seagrass, or what is happening there? It's a normal part of the seagrass meadow. So seagrasses provide a lot of ecosystem functions, and one of those functions is that they are a stable substrate for other things to sit on. seagrasses themselves are quite difficult to digest because of cellulose inside them. So fish can't really eat them that much. But the algae that are growing on them, those epiphytes, are really good fish food.
Can there be too much epiphytes on the seagrass?
Yes, there can be, and there can be the wrong sorts of epiphytes on the seagrass. So depending on the nutrient levels, that can become a real problem. So here in Western Australia we tend to have very nutrient poor waters. If there's a lot of nutrients in the water, we can get a build-up of what are called nuisance epiphytes. So things that grow very quickly and just smother the seagrass.
Right. And here's another species of seagrass, and from my understanding that's your favourite species, am I correct?
This is my favourite species. This is Epiphytes antarctica. And it's different from, if you look at the Posidonia here, the Posidonia sinuosa, it's got these simple strap-like leaves. But the Epiphytes antarctica has these woody stems and they have little leaf clusters growing off them, which are really cool. So the woody stems can last for up to 2 years, whereas even the big Posidonia sinuosa leaves only last for a couple of months. So that makes a big difference to the complexity of the communities they can provide.
Right. When you said the Posidonia leaves only last for a few months, is that why we see lots of seagrass washing up on the shorelines?
Exactly right. They tend to grow the most during spring and summer when there's the most light and it's the warmest conditions, so you get a huge amount of biomass being produced. Once the first winter storms come through, all of that old growth gets ripped out and it ends up washing up on the beaches. And that's quite important because the seagrass material, that biomass that washes up on the beaches, will eventually break down and provide nutrients back into the system.
Right, so it's very important for the nutrients going back into the system that plays a part in so many different other species lifetime. Does it also help build up beaches as well?
Sorry, what's that last thing?
Does it also help build up the beaches as well? Or is it like stabilising sediments there or building up with sand and all that?
It probably doesn't make that much difference to the beach structure, but yes, the nutrients going back into the system are really important because, as I said, this is a nutrient poor area, so the system relies on that recycling of seagrass leaves that wash up on the beach.
How many seagrass species are there in Australia and how many are in the world?
So there are 72 species of seagrass around the world. Australia has probably about half of them, and Western Australia is seagrass central, and we have 25 species of seagrass in WA. That includes both tropical and temperate species.
Right, that's a fair few. How big can seagrass get?
The biggest one, I think, is a Zostro species in Korea from memory, which is about 7 metres in length. So the leaves are 7 metres long.
That's huge, it's like a kelp forest.
Yeah, it's getting up there. It's absolutely massive.
And how is our current state of seagrass? Are they looking alright? Are they like heavily under threat?
They're under threat at a local scale from what we do to them. So they're vulnerable to things like fishing techniques, so things like trawling and those sorts of things. And we also pump a lot of nutrients into the ocean, either from agriculture or from industry and so on. And that can also cause problems for seagrass. And then we've got local scale things like topsoil being washed in and smothering them, and then things like borings as well.
Does seagrass help climate change in mitigation?
Yes, it does. So seagrass is probably, I have to say that very carefully because we're not entirely sure, is probably reasonably resilient to climate change. It's got to take quite a bit of temperature increase before it struggles. But what it does is it actually buries a lot of its material underground. And again, you can see here where this edge of the meadow has been eroded away. We've got bits of old rhizomes of seagrass sticking out, okay? So these are the old underground stems that seagrass normally used to stay in place, those stems end up being buried, and as the seagrass keeps growing, it just grows over the top of it, and you end up with this huge mound of seagrass material that remains buried. And this is what we call blue carbon. So it's organic material that's buried underground and locked away. And that's really quite a big deal, because it means that the carbon dioxide that the seagrasses are taking from photosynthesis is being buried and is being locked away. So it does offset some of the extra carbon dioxide we're putting into the atmosphere.
Seagrass seems to be important in so many different ways. So we go have a swim over there and see if we can find some other things?
For sure. Yeah, can you tell me what these fish are? So there are all these fish. I'm really curious.
This little friendly guy here is the western butterfish. So this is actually a species of fish that has come down with tropicalisation. So as the waters have got warmer, these have moved further and further down, but they have established populations very well, especially in Keulen Sound. It seems to be one of the most common fish that you'll find there. These white and red wrasse there, they're called your western seagrass. So those ones are females, and when they're in a juvenile phase, they actually can act as cleaner fish. So we don't have too many cleaner fish down in our temperate regions. Those guys there fill the niche of that, and they can sometimes form breeding stations. We have observed them on some of the artificial reefs. They will signpost when they're ready to be cleaned or wanting to attract some clients, let's say. They'll sit up, tail down, head up, and they'll sort of, I guess, signpost to say, hey, we're open for business. And then the fish that want to be cleaned, let's say we found a lot of them were your pelagic species like your Samson fish or your silver trevally, they would do the same thing. They might go nose down or they might go tail down, and they'll be like, all right, clean me please. And they, important part to get how to keep fish healthy, because there's a lot of parasites and sometimes viruses, and those guys will be able to take those bits off them and keep them nice and healthy.
Yeah, like they say, fish don't die of old age.
So, actually, and that bigger one there is the male. He's just swam away from us, but sometimes you're going to see some black dots on these western seagrass, and that is actually a parasite. It is information of the parasite that happens. It's quite common in areas that have high traffic of boats, and it doesn't seem to be harmful to the fish, and they just end up with these black dots on them.
Amazing the effects that we have on these ecosystems just by driving boats around.
Exactly. A lot of times they can be pretty resilient as well. Let's have a swim over there. I kind of like the look of that sort of... There's a few Carline species around. I don't know if they're going to come back at that eagle rate. If I start looking inside this seagrass meadow here, Mike, can I expect to see lots of different things?
Yeah, these systems are just full of all sorts of different things. Plants and animals absolutely thriving with loads and loads of different things going on.
Is there many things that eat seagrass?
There are lots of things that eat little bits of seagrass, but there are only a couple of animals really that will eat large amounts, and that's the dugong and the green sea turtle. There are a few other fish that will also eat them, but really the majority of the seagrass biomass that we have here is going to die in place, and often it ends up on our beaches.
Right.
But the really important thing that the seagrasses provide are all these epiphytes. This is why there are so many fish feeding in these ecosystems. There are just loads and loads of epiphytes, and they're good eating.
They also attract a lot of your zooplankton and other sort of small crustaceans that larger fish don't like it to eat as well.
Yeah, it's a very complex community, so obviously lots of algae in there means that there's food for all sorts of different things, including really tiny crustaceans, and they in turn are fed on by various levels of fish as well.
You quickly mentioned earlier when they said they wash up on the beach. What are those brown balls that we always see washed up on our shorelines?
Yeah, they look a little bit like turds almost, and they're made up of seagrass fibres. So, as I mentioned, seagrass have a lot of cellulose in them, that's in the form of fibres, so very tough strands. And that's why they're so difficult to digest. That's why not many things will actually eat them. But when the seagrass leaves die, those fibres will roll around and entangle in themselves and end up forming these little balls and structures that you find washed up on the beach.
I always remembered as a kid throwing them around. So, Cassia, I want to quickly get you to point the camera to this guy here with a big camera. This is Ryan. So Ryan is currently filming a documentary of what we're doing here today. And within this documentary, if you're streaming this wherever you are and would like to feature it, we would very much love you to as well. If you could take a picture or a little video clip of wherever you are and send it in to Paramount Importance, that would absolutely be awesome. I reckon, Mark, let's have a swim a little bit over this way. There seems to be so many fish hanging out over there. We can actually see the little cleaner fish over there cleaning one of those zebrafish.
These cleaning stations are really important for the whole ecosystem, aren't they?
They are. Can you see that on the camera, Cassia? The zebrafish sitting over there with that little western kinggrass. We may have disturbed the interaction. Hey James, are you still hearing us nice and clear on the stream?
Hear you loud and clear.
You were mentioning some pretty interesting things on the drive out on the boat. Can you tell us some stuff about the seagrass?
Yeah, can you and Mike guess which animal species was responsible for finding the world's biggest seagrass bed?
Was responsible for finding it or forming it?
Finding it.
Let me guess, tiger sharks.
Yes, indeed. It was the tiger shark. Some scientists in the Bahamas, where tiger sharks do a migration and go quite deep, attached some cameras to tiger sharks, and they found 66 to 92,000 square kilometers of seagrass bed. Huge.
That's a lot of seagrass.
They're really helping the scientists out. So, going back to what a lot of the fish that we're seeing around here, a lot of them are herbivores. So the zebrafish, we saw some buff crab in the distance. They were coming closer. Herbivorous fish, to be able to digest the algae and seagrass, they have really long intestinal tracts, sometimes 6 to 12 times their body length. And that is because algae isn't exactly packed with proteins and other carbohydrates, things, nutrients that they need. So they have to eat a huge amount to be able to get enough energy. Where, say, a smaller piscivorous fish or other fish that eat small crustaceans, their intestinal tracts are a lot smaller and they get a lot more nutrients. One of the interesting things that fish have evolved to be able to have certain types of diets.
It's amazing how they've made those changes just to adapt to what's available to them.
Exactly. What about so you said earlier that the seagrass are flowering plants. I don't see any flowers or seeds here at the moment, but how do they move? How do they propagate?
You can see there's a whole bunch of smaller seagrass species. So this is Helophila ovalis. This is Syringonium. And I think there's some Heterozostra as well. So these are colonizing species, so they will be the first ones that go out into their sand areas.
And with the seeds, how do they get, do you have like natural pollinators down here?
So the seagrasses produce flowers, both male and female flowers, and so the males produce pollen, the females produce eggs, and so yes, pollination has to happen. We don't have any animal pollinators, or vectors as we call them, like we do on land, so birds, insects, and that sort of thing on land. So all of the pollination occurs via currents, water currents.
Right, so like I said, the long current or just the ones that move around here?
No, just the waves and smaller currents that move around the seagrass meadows. So they pick up the pollen from the male flowers and transport it to the female flowers, and that's how pollination happens.
Right. And how do you monitor seagrass?
So monitoring seagrass is quite important because we need to understand how well it's surviving and what risks it's facing and so on, and how it's adapting to different conditions. So normally what we do is we run a line out and count the amount of seagrass, and we compare different locations and over different time periods as well. So you build up a picture of how the seagrass ecosystem changes over time. When we run those lines out, we use what's called a quadrant, which is basically a square about half a metre by half a metre. Plot that down over the seagrass meadow and literally count the number of shoots that are in that space. And I'll show you what the shoots are. Shoots are basically a bundle of seagrass leaves, and you can see we've got a couple of shoots here. That's a shoot there, that's a shoot there, that's a shoot there. So you need to count all of those, and that gives you a fixed number that you can use to compare different places at different times and so on.
Right, and what about restoration?
So yeah, we've damaged a lot of seagrass. As humans, we've done a lot of damage to seagrass meadows over the years, and given that they're so important, we need to think about how we can restore them. Now, the best way to protect seagrasses is actually to preserve them in the first place. Restoring seagrass is complicated and it's expensive. It takes a lot of time, takes a lot of money, and it should be seen as a last resort. But we can do it. We have been working on techniques to do this, and you can literally take pieces of seagrass and plant it somewhere else, or you can gather the seeds and plant them somewhere else, and so on.
Right, why can't we do that right now?
So we're actually in a reserve, so Rutness Island waters are protected, so it's a marine protected area, and so we would need permits to be able to do that. And the Rutness Island seagrasses are actually pretty intact, they're very healthy ecosystem, so the Rutness Island Authority is obviously very keen to preserve that state. But in other areas where we've lost a lot of seagrass, for example, Keulen Sound, we've lost 80% of the seagrass that was there. And we've been doing a lot of work trying to restore seagrass in Keulen Sound, looking at methods to do it and so on.
Right. Is that little plastic grass still here? Or do you swim away? No, I just swim away. There's actually a lot of fish species just swimming around here. I did see one of my favourite ones, which was the rainbow kale, but he's also just swam away. So sometimes they play the game, sometimes they don't.
There's so many fish, they're so cool.
I want to have a look at this, some of that algae just over there. Do you know what that species of algae is?
Which one? Off the top of my head, no. Hang on, let me have a look. This one here?
Yep.
This is a sargassum. So we've got quite a few different species of sargassum around, and they're quite common all up and down the coast. Most of these are brown algae, so the larger ones are the brown algae, and then we've got a number of reds and greens in there as well.
Right. And back up to this Epiphytes here, I remember we had a researcher at Murdoch University, he found that the
stems. They're really tough. They don't break very easily, whereas the Posidonia leaves actually are quite fragile. They tear quite easily. But these woody stems are really good, and so you can see there's all sorts of stuff growing on there. And yeah, it's got common to see eggs and all sorts of other things got a big deposited on them.
There's a lot of fish species that have evolved and other animals like little crabs and other crustaceans that only live in seagrass. Why is it a unique environment for fish? And do we find seagrass everywhere around the world?
Yeah, we find seagrass pretty much everywhere except for Antarctica. It'll even grow in Alaska, where one of the major risks for the seagrass is actually ice scouring. So it's pretty robust. It'll grow just about anywhere. But yeah, it's a really important ecosystem. It provides that three-dimensional structure which allows all sorts of things to grow there.
Right. I actually learned a fact the other day about those buff ribs that are just sitting around there. That when they're juveniles, they actually eat red and green algae, and then when they get older, they switch to eating brown algae, because brown algae is a lot more complex and harder to digest, and that when they're in a juvenile phase, they have to use their own enzymes in their body to break down the food, and as they get older, they start developing other microbes in their bellies, and then they're able to break down like sargassum and kelp and all that, which is pretty interesting that they switched their diets as they got older.
Yeah, very cool. There's a lot of animals that will switch their diet at different life history stages. And so the seagrass ecosystem provides that diversity of food sources, particularly for the juveniles, and then as they mature, they can move into other systems.
Yes, that's right. Hey, James, I know you've got a few more facts about seagrass up there. Do you want to send us down another quiz question?
You want another question?
Yes, send us another question down.
Okay, so we've had a viewer question, and the viewer wants to know, are there any sea cucumbers around Rottnest?
Yes, I'm pretty sure there are. We can't see any at the moment, but there are often small sea cucumbers that live around the roots of Posidonia meadows. Really tiny ones, probably only about 5 or 10 centimeters in length.
There was actually a big one where we were sitting down on the stools.
Yeah, I'd expect a few species around here.
Yeah, they're really important for helping recycle some of that waste material from the other more charismatic animals on the reef.
Here we go, we got another, this is called the banded sea snake. Those guys can live up to 54 years of age.
Wow.
We actually see a lot of these fish that we mentioned earlier, how those small red ones were the juveniles, and that big red one there is the male. A lot of the wrasse species are born, well, all of them are born as females, and then they'll live in these social groups where predominantly there'll be all females, and you'll have one large male. When that one large male dies or disappears, it'll be the fastest growing female will then turn into a male. And usually only have 1 or 2 males for a whole group of the female fish.
One of the things that I've noticed here is some caulerpa. So this is a green alga. We've got lots of different types of caulerpa. They come in all different shapes and sizes. But a lot of people get them confused with seagrasses because they show a lot of physical similarities. So seagrasses have these underground stems that are buried in the sand and then send up these shoots. Caulerpa does something similar. So you can see it has these sort of horizontal stems that are running along there, and then it's got these little upright things that are sticking up as well. But they are still algae, so they're a lot simpler internally. They don't have the same complexity of organs that we find in the seagrasses. But they're very cool. We've got a lot of different species. You can see there's quite a few different species literally right here on this rock.
and so the sargassum there attached to rocks.
So most of the algae attach to rocks by what's called a holdfast. So they have a small spot where they glue onto the substrate. That's very different to a seagrass, which is obviously a grouping substrate and has those underground those underground stems that hold the whole thing in place. And the benefit, of course, then is that it also holds the sand in place, which is, again, talking back to the coastal erosion issue.
Going back with the coastal erosion, the seagrass also can reduce the wave energy because waves move in a circular motion. So at the surface, they got, if you imagine like a big circle, and that's your barreling waves, and then as you go down, it's smaller and smaller. So when the waves start moving along to the coastline, when it hits those seagrass beds, it kind of acts like a drag system and slows it down and reducing the energy of waves that hit your shoreline, which also then reduces your coastal erosion.
Exactly right. So seagrasses operate on currents in several different ways. So obviously there's a three-dimensional structure that slows down the water that's flowing over the substrate, and that means that the bottom, the sand, is actually held in place and it's protected from some of those big waves as well. So it works in a couple of different ways there.
I reckon I want to have a quick look at that ledge there, just in case there's something cool. There's some soft corals.
While you swim, I will give people a seagrass fact. So, did you know that a colony of seagrass is actually the oldest living organism on the planet? It's estimated to be up to 200,000 years old, and it lives in the Mediterranean just off the coast of Ibiza.
Not finding any crayfish around here.
Wishful thinking.
Maybe time for another seagrass fact while these guys go hunting. So in addition to being the oldest living organism, a species of seagrass is actually the largest living organism at 200 square kilometers, or about 20,000 rugby pitches. So this is a species of Posidonia up in Shark Bay.
If you want to try and come in here, we've got a cardinal fish. The cardinal fish are mouth-brooding fish, which means that when they have their babies, the mother will pick up all the eggs and hold it, brood the babies in their mouth till they get of age that they can be free swimming. So that guy there is your western striped cardinal fish.
You've got some zebrafish over your shoulder.
We have a school of tailor. So these guys are commonly mistaken for silver bream. We actually don't get silver bream in the temperate regions of the southwestern coastline down here, and it's called your taiwan. Those guys, those green ones there, they're called your brownfield wrasse. And they're actually a seagrass specialist wrasse. They live solely in your seagrass ecosystem.
So just while they're swimming back, just like to thank everyone for joining the stream. We're currently at over 130 people watching across the various platforms, so thank you very much.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. I'm really excited to be able to share all this information about seagrasses because Sunday, of course, is World Seagrass Day, and it's an international day to celebrate the importance of seagrasses at a global level, and just to raise awareness of them.
There are so many fish around. It's so cool. Those guys swimming at the top, they're called blowhole perch. Although those are a very funny name for a fish.
Can you do an air check, please, too?
Just before we started the live stream, we had a little baby cuttlefish or bobtail squid come over and have a look. It just sat on our hands as we were waiting down here, but it seems to have disappeared by now. James, do you have some questions for Mark and I?
I do have some questions. So first of the new questions is, why is there coral around Rottnest but not other locations in Perth?
Okay, so Rottnest Island is right fairly close to the edge of the continental shelf, and we get the Lewin current flowing down the West Australian coast, which gives us tropical species coming down the coast. So at Rottnest Island, compared to inshore Perth, we've got a lot more tropical species that visit this part of the world.
Are there any other places you know that there's coral nearby?
Well, we have lots of temperate species of corals as well. You got the Great Southern Reef that runs all the way from Victoria right up to the Umbrella Islands. That's where it ends.
Yeah, that's right. So the Great Southern Reef extends along the entire southern Australian coastline. It's basically the temperate equivalent to the Great Barrier Reef. So really diverse, huge numbers of species and hugely productive. So really important ecosystem in its own right. But because it's not, the fleshy corals of the tropics, it doesn't get anywhere near the same amount of recognition.
Cool. Can you comment on seagrasses' ability to live in sheltered and exposed conditions?
Sorry, James, can you please repeat that question?
Sure. So the viewer wants to know, what type of wave exposure does seagrass like?
It depends very much on the type of seagrass. So our Posidonia species here tend to prefer fairly calm conditions. So in sheltered bays you see these huge meadows. But there are other Posidonia species that will grow right in amongst the reefs where the waves are crashing and so, can tolerate really rough conditions. The amphibolous species also can grow attached to rocks and, again, able to withstand really rough conditions.
Awesome. And a really interesting question here about, does seagrass have any medical or medicinal uses?
Interesting question. We haven't actually got much evidence one way or the other. The research simply hasn't been done. They have been used for food in some cases, but I don't know about medicinal applications.
Cool. And we have some questions from the WOMSI stream. The first of which is, what is the key threats facing Australian seagrasses?
Australian seagrasses have been greatly affected by two many nutrients. So pollution caused by either agricultural runoff or industrial runoff, those sorts of things. At a local scale, we've also had things like trawl fisheries and those sorts of things that also have damaged seagrass. But at the very large scale, so for example, COVID Sound sort of scale, we're looking at things like nutrient pollution that has become a real problem.
Cool. And then following on from that, can you talk a little bit about the restoration that's gone on locally?
Sure, there's been a lot. So because COVID Sound has lost so much seagrass, it's actually gained a lot of attention for how to actually get the seagrass to come back. The problem with COVID Sound is that it's fairly enclosed, so there's not much opportunity for new seedlings to settle in and so to recolonise naturally. So there's been a lot of research on how we can actually make a difference in changing or bringing back the seagrass.
What are some of the methods that they use?
So I've been involved in doing seagrass restoration work since the 1990s. And we've used all sorts of different methods. We've tried a lot of different things because our seagrasses are different to the ones they have in America or Europe. And so we have to have our own approaches to doing this. So we've tried things like literally taking pieces of seagrass and then planting it somewhere else. We've even gone to the extent of having a huge underwater bulldozer type machine that would dig up big plots of seagrass and plant it where you need it to regrow. So yeah, there's lots of different methods that have been used. The one that's taking interest at the moment, and obviously we need to transplant large areas and we need to restore very large areas that have been lost, is using seeds and seedlings. So for example, the seeds, the fruits that are being produced by Posidonia can be harvested and then dropped in the right place. And so that gives us a lot of opportunities to restore very large areas.
Like, would that meadow make it over to here within a year, or is there a rate?
One of the big things about restoring seagrass is having the environment right. So the first thing you need to do is make sure that the conditions are suitable. So for this seagrass here, where it's been eroded away, you can see there's probably about a metre drop, maybe a little bit more than a metre, where it's dropped down, and the seagrass simply can't grow down that slope. So we need to allow time for the sand to build up and for it to be able to move in naturally. We can do that artificially, or we can wait for it, which would potentially take quite a long time.
Do you have some more questions, James?
Sure. Question for you, Kurt. How many species of fish are found in the Perth area?
So in the Perth area, we can find over 500 different species of fish. There's a huge diversity. A lot of them live in your really near-shore coastal areas, and a lot of them have adapted to live in certain areas. So I spoke about a lot of fish have adapted to live in your seagrass. So usually they're long, they're green, and they can weave in and out of your seagrass like that. And then there's ones that's specified living in the coral reefs. There's the gold-spotted sweet lip that's hanging out over there, although he's just got a bit camera shy and he's swam away. But there's a huge diversity of fish. Not as much diversity of fish that you get up in the coral reefs, and that's because there's a lot more nutrients. Fish grow a lot faster in warm waters. In the cooler waters, fish grow a lot slower, but you generally find a lot older fish living in your cooler temperatures.
Cool. So there's about 490 species of fish that are directly associated with seagrass in Australia. Another question from the audience is about temperature. So how hot does it get at Rottnest, and what temperature can seagrasses tolerate?
So I'm not entirely sure what the temperature here is at the moment. It's probably about 24 degrees maybe. That's about the maximum temperature that it gets here. It'll get down to probably about 18 18 or 19 degrees during winter. That seems to be about fairly typical for this part of the world, but seagrasses actually do better with slightly warmer temperatures, so their physiological optimum temperature is actually up around 29-30 degrees.
Awesome. And another one, question is seagrass heading towards aquaculture on shore? So I guess, is there any aquaculture of seagrass?
Almost. So for the seedling restoration processes that are being trialled, we have offshore ponds and so on that we allow the seedlings to grow before we throw them out into the ocean. That obviously gives them extra resource and a better likelihood of surviving when they're transplanted. I mean, parts of the world, particularly the northern hemisphere, Europe and so on, especially, they have offshore agriculture facilities where they're growing up nurseries and they plant those seagrasses out wherever they want. We're not quite there yet.
They also use seagrass though for like human uses, like they can make weave them into baskets or hats, or in some cases, I know there's someone upstairs on the boat that had a bed made out of seagrass and they're a little child. So there's different uses that we've used them for throughout the years as well.
Yeah, seagrass has been used for all sorts of different things. One of the big industries was actually using seagrass fibres as home insulation and for furniture stuffing. The benefit is that the fibres are actually fairly tolerant to fire, so they don't burn easily. So they make good home insulation. Obviously not great for the seagrass minnows, although I think mostly they were collecting stuff that washed up onto the beaches.
45.
We might be getting close to the time, and we might want to start heading back up to the boat. We'll join you up there up on the deck very shortly.
So just why they're heading back, I'll tell you that there aren't a huge number of species that eat live seagrass. The most famous of the ones that do are some of the turtle species. So green turtles can eat up to 2 kilos of seagrass a day. Dugongs kind of hold the record. We're looking at 35 to 40 kilos of seagrass eaten a day by dugongs. And there actually is one species of omnivorous shark. This is a shark that feeds on seagrass and on crustaceans. It's the bonnet head shark, a type of hammerhead from the US. Alright, it looks like they're just about... But a giant leap for podcasting. How does it feel to have done the world's first underwater podcast?
That was amazing.
Absolutely amazing. So cool to be able to be underwater and be able to speak so freely to you.
Yeah.
All the knowledge that you put through was just absolutely awesome. Like the little dream of me sitting down as a kid swimming through coral gardens or out in the reef here, being able to say what I was thinking in my mind out to everyone and be able to hear back was absolutely an unbelievable experience.
And for me, just being able to share seagrasses like this for World Seagrass Day, I mean, seagrasses are probably the most important coastal ecosystems that most people don't know about. You know, people just don't stick their head underwater. It's difficult to get to. So having this technology to be able to do that is just amazing. It's so good.
And we're all that technology is very thankful for Jason, who's just standing behind you, Ollie. Jason here has spent years and years developing all these crazy things that we've got on the there's like 4 or 5 computers, there's monitors, there's fiber optic cables, there's cameras, Starlink, we've got 2 Starlinks, 4G, 5G networks, sonar comms.
Lots of everything, but you pulled it off, guys. Well done. Thank you everyone for watching today. It's been great having you here.
It's been absolutely awesome. There's also been a huge team of people down on this boat. I think we've got 14 of us. Some of us still in the water. We've got Kessia on the camera down there.
The stream really appreciated how good the camera lady was.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thanks, Cass.
We've got Ariana, who was our safety diver. Trini, our skipper. And engineer.
Saviour.
Saviour. Twice. She got us a boat when we lost the boat. And then when we were floating ducks out in the middle of the ocean out there, she spent a good hour in some very tight places getting the engine all back together. We got Ryan, who is filming way over there. James, you got Nick, who's also filming. We've got Jen, we've got Jeff, Nathan somewhere. Nathan's down here.
And the full face masks.
And we're very thankful to have the sponsors of Murdoch University and WAMSI, the West Australian Marine Science Institute, and they've also hosted an event today. So hello guys, thank you so much for organising. This has been a dream come true. It's been absolutely amazing what we've done.
From Geraldton to Bunbury.
Albany, I know Albany schools,
yeah.
Schools in South Australia, schools on the East Coast. I think there's a few community groups elsewhere in the world. It's absolutely unbelievable what the amount of people this is connected to raise awareness for seagrass. As you said, seagrass is found all over the world, such an important ecosystem. And to do this for World Seagrass Day has been very special. So
Absolutely
thanks,
brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Is there any more questions, or are we going to wrap up? And
I think we can wrap up, and then we can write responses to anyone else who we didn't get to in the chat.
We also, quick mention then, we do have some merch. If you jump onto ParamountImportance.com, you can buy one of our t-shirts, and that will help us out a lot. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining in. This has been absolutely amazing, and thank you to all these guys here. This is
Spread the good word of seagrass.
Yes.
World Seagrass Day, Sunday. Special day.
There was a request for a seagrass dance.
Seagrass dance. There we go.
Yay!
Seagrass dance.